It's time to accelerate. Hi, I'm your host, Andy Paul. Join me as I host conversations with the leading experts in sales, marketing, sales automation, sales process, leadership, management, training, coaching, any resource that I believe to help you accelerate the growth of your sales, your business, and most importantly, you. Hello, and welcome to the show. Today, my guest is Kelly Riggs. Kelly is creator of the Business Locker Room, an author, speaker about sales, podcaster. I've been on his show a couple times. And he wrote a book with one of my all-time favorite titles, Quit Whining and Start Selling. So, Kelly, how you doing?
Oh, fantastic, Andy. Great to be here.
So, rather than have me bore the audience with, reading a bio about you, why don't you tell me about yourself? Introduce yourself to the audience and tell us what you do and who do you do it for?
Well, I'll give you the Cliff Notes version. About 10 years ago, a little less than 10 years ago, struck out on my own as an independent. I guess the easiest word, Andy, is consultant.
Yes, the dreaded word.
The dreaded word, right? So, but I work in three areas. I do the same kinds of things that you do, I suspect, on the sales side, train salespeople, sales strategists, consult with sales organizations, that kind of things. I also do a lot of management leadership development. In fact, the first book I wrote was called One-on-One Management, What Every Great Manager Knows That You Don't. And
I love the subtitle in that book.
Yeah, kind of an interesting way to start, considering that all of my career has been in sales and as a sales executive and as a serial entrepreneur, business owner. And then I do a lot of strategic planning as well. About a year ago, we rebranded the company, as you mentioned, the Business Locker Room, because I just like the analogies. Everybody has a connection to sport in some way, shape, form, or fashion. And business is like sports. You need great leaders. You need great players. You need a great game plan. And it's a kind of game where you keep score. I mean, so there's winners and losers. And business is exactly like that.
So what was your sport?
I played high school and college football. Well, let me rephrase. I played high school football, and I was on the college football team. So,
yeah. Where'd you go?
University of Tulsa.
University of Tulsa, okay.
Yeah, so I had the opportunity to play there, and it's a school that, as you go back a little ways, has a pretty storied history.
Yeah.
Largent played there. Jim Rome played there. I mean, some really great players played there. And back in the 60s, it was very prolific offensively.
Well, they still are. Don't they play a wide open offense?
Yeah, they really do. They've had some good years in the past several, not so much last year, but recently, yeah, they've done well.
Very good. So you're Oklahoman.
Yes.
All right. So how'd you get your start in sales?
Interestingly enough, I left that college career. Actually, I left a bit early. I decided that I was in school to be an engineer, Andy, and engineering and I didn't get along very well. I didn't have that kind of patience. So I decided that I wanted to marry my high school sweetheart, and we got married. And I left school, dropped out of school, and got a sales job. You can only imagine what my parents were thinking at that time.
Well, what was the sales job?
I started working in the office machines business back when you sold
Copiers.
copy machines and
Right.
things like that. Absolutely, early 80s, and it was a commercial enterprise. I mean, it was business to business, and we were selling a machine back in that day that did 12 copies a minute, and
Whoa.
we were getting $2,500 for that piece of equipment. I mean, that's how far back technology goes. We had a bigger machine that did 28 copies a minute, something like that. You know, it was $4,000 or $5,000. So nowadays you can buy a piece of equipment that will make your coffee and do your laundry and all your printing and scanning and everything, and you can get it down at Walmart for $150.
Well, exactly. So were you like me? I mean, I started my career, get in my car, drive to a business park the car, go door to door to door to door, prospecting. How about you?
Yeah, very similar. I mean, we had lead cards that were just generic, like, from some business organization that listed the decision maker and the addresses and those kinds of things. But we looked for a certain kind of business. We didn't filter much, but, you were looking for a certain type of business, and you just went out and made calls. The one big difference between what I see today and what I did then is my boss would not let me out the door to see a customer until I could demonstrate proficiency in doing a presentation with that product. I had to be able to handle objections, ask the right questions, the whole deal. And after he gave me his blessing, then I could go make calls.
And then he would never let you stay in the office.
No, exactly. Don't come back without an order.
Oh, gosh. We could get into those stories. I had those days, but especially at the end of a quarter where the branch manager needed to meet his bonus number. Yeah, I'd go stand at the customer's car in his parking lot because he'd already thrown me out of his office, and I'd wait there, and he'd come out at 5:30, and there I'd be standing. It's like, you don't understand. I can't go back until I come with an order.
Yeah, let me tell you, the choice here is easy. I can confront you in the parking lot, or I can go back and see the boss. That's not a
Yeah,
tough decision.
yeah, you were much easier. So, so what have you seen in terms of the big changes? And yeah, obviously some of these are pretty obvious, but in terms of the person to person interaction part of it, and you'd sort of alluded to it as maybe less proficiency perhaps on the part of some frontline salespeople these days in the products. But what are the major changes you're seeing?
Well, the major changes I'm saying, you're right. The big ones are obvious. Technology has changed. A lot of things have changed from 2 decades to almost 3 decades ago now. But I'll tell you, the big changes are that it seems that there's less emphasis on interpersonal skills. There's less emphasis on what you do in the presentation, the sales presentation. It's more about what we do in terms of social media and awareness and research online and using LinkedIn and tools like that. And I frankly, I think in many ways, salespeople have gotten a tad bit lazy. In my view, no matter how much technology there is out there, how much social media has impacted the space, selling is still something that's done one-on-one. And it's something, I mean, maybe one on many, but there still has to be a relationship built. It's odd that, Andy, salespeople will still tell me today, sales is all about relationships, but I'm not really sure they understand what that means.
Mm-hmm.
To them, a relationship is, we text on a regular basis. Well, I'm not sure that qualifies.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that is one thing that seems to be missing is that, it's still a face-to-face business or, person-to-person business at some point, and customer buying from you has to get the measure of you, and that has multiple dimensions, but, your product credibility, product proficiency, ability to be trustworthy, have integrity, and so on, but those things are still important. I mean, it's important to the customer. I think it's no less important to the customer than it was 30 years ago.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. In the big picture, my sense is that salespeople are needed even more today than they were. Now, I know all of the industry data suggests that business-to-business salespeople, that field is going to shrink over time. But the thing about the customer is they have so much more information. They really need help making good decisions. This is why I really love what you're doing and what you've done in your 2 books is it puts an enormous emphasis on responsiveness. It puts an enormous emphasis on knowing exactly what the customer needs and when they need it and to be ready to help them at a moment's notice. The whole idea of taking a few days to follow up on a lead or to get back to a customer, I mean, those days are definitely gone. By the time you get there, the game's over.
Yeah, I mean, it always worked to your advantage to be this way, but even more so today, because
Much more.
I think we've trained customers to too large of an extent to not expect salespeople to get back to them, to not expect responsiveness.
Well,
And
we're the same way, aren't we? We go to a restaurant and we get antsy if it takes someone a minute to bring us a menu. It's
right,
kind of the society we live in.
right. So we've trained them not to expect it, and so that when you do become responsive, when you do act in a way that really helps the customer, oriented toward helping the customer, move through their buying process more quickly, you stand out in the crowd.
No question. Well, one other thing I wanted to mention about what have I seen change? On the downside, sadly, one of the things that I perceive, and perhaps I'm wrong, but in my limited data set and the interactions that I have with customers and salespeople is, Andy, it just seems to me like it's getting harder to find salespeople who do want to be great at something, who are willing to invest the time and the effort, that have the desire and discipline to roll up their sleeves and really be fantastic at what they do. Mediocrity seems to be much more common today, and I'm sad about that because it just seems like there's so much more opportunity. On the other hand, that of course presents opportunities for people, but it seems like it's harder to find people who just want to be great at something.
Well, that's interesting. Why do you think that is?
It's hard. I think some of that is societal norms. I think that we're a victim of our own affluence in many ways. There are so many opportunities to move around. And you talk to millennials. I mean, the average time on a job for a millennial today is about 12 months. I mean, in 5 years, people will have 3 to 5 jobs. And back in the day when we were hiring, if you didn't come from a job and you hadn't been there for 3, 4, 5 years or more, we thought you were a slacker. We just figured you couldn't keep a job. Now people will move automatically if they don't get what they want. And I think it's just in many ways a part of the society that we're growing up in. And I hate to be cliche, but I think in some ways it goes back to in school everybody gets a medal, and some of that is generalization and cliche, but it's that way because it's true in a lot of cases. And so it's just harder to find people who have had to fail, who've had to overcome adversity, who've encountered obstacles. Many people are coming out of college with a degree and they expect to make $70,000 and get a BMW and have a nice house, and they can't see it any other way, which is great if you're willing to work for it. But their role models, so oftentimes it seems like in media, is, hey, life is easy. Just jump out there and get your 15 minutes of fame and make a fortune. And sadly, I don't think that they understand the people behind the scenes have worked enormously hard to come to that instantaneous success that they think they see.
Yeah, well, I think you hit an interesting point, though, because I sort of have a different view of millennials. I know that people sort of paint them with a broad brush, but I've got a son who's definitely a millennial, starting his career just a few years into his career, and I'm not sure I've ever seen a generation as motivated as, well, certainly the people he's with, and he's not the only one. And through my work with clients, I see a lot of, I think, to me, the problem is not the generation as much as you sort of touched on, the role model, but I see it as sort of the role model in the business space, right? In the workplace, that they,
Yes.
the way I learned is when I first started sales, I looked at the most successful person in the group, and both my sales manager and the most successful sales guy in my office, and I modeled myself after them. Mm-hmm. And I think it's that next layer up that's really the issue, is that, and we hear this all the time in sales, is that managers aren't coaching, right? Mm-hmm. In fact, I've seen sales managers that hire coaches to coach their salespeople.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, well, what's your job if you're a manager but to coach them, right?
You for, right?
We should actually be calling you a sales coach, and you hire somebody to do your management tasks. And so I think it's really there. I think our problem is, or the problem that exists perhaps in sales with the new generation coming in, is who are they looking up to within the organization that they can model their behaviors on? Because I think they really want to succeed. I don't see any difference between this generation and previous. It's just maybe they just don't have the role models within the workplace.
Yeah, I'm spot on, Andy. I 100% agree with that. I think that people come into a culture, a company, a family, a society, whatever, and they're going to learn from what's around them. And it was absolutely quite a bit more common as a young guy to see mentoring and training and required coaching. And I really do think it's not a younger generation issue, as you've suggested. I think it's an older generation issue, and I think we've gotten stale and lazy, and I don't know what our motivations are, right. But I'm with you. I've got 3 millennials as kids, and my oldest son, we've had this conversation many times. He's doing quite well in business, but he'll tell you right up front, hey, I had good role models. You and mom and the people that I was around, I learned the value of hard work and excellence and those kinds of things. I think you're on top of it.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of an issue we need to look at, generally as sales thought leaders and so on, and certainly what I try to focus on some is, when I get back and talk about the basics and the fundamentals, is, those are timeless. Focus on those, and everybody needs to. The managers, the leaders, we can get wound up in complex sales processes and methodologies, but if you're going to have people work for you, you got to coach them. Yeah,
no question. In fact, it's interesting because I just finished a blog post that I'll be putting up in a few days that relates to this, and it's about training. I mean, you ask companies if they train their people, and they'll say, "Oh, sure," and that you'll go in, as I often do, and not only do they not train their people, I mean, they equate product orientation and learning the sales administrative task as being training. Not only do they not train their people well, they don't train them in selling skills. They don't onboard them well. They don't have any systematic methodology for bringing their people up to a skill level. They don't test. On and on and on it goes. And I think that's the inherent weakness now that exists.
Yeah, and there's no development process, that says, okay, because again, when we got hired, you and I, probably roughly the same generation, the big companies were sweeping up lots of college graduates every year, right? And we all
Yes.
got funneled into these very formal training programs. Within my first year, I was away from home 8 weeks in a training center run by the company. How
Right.
to sell, how to learn, learning the product, and this was, selling computer products. But, half of that was learning how to sell, the other half was the product. I mean, it was pretty intense. So I said one was 2 weeks and one was 6 weeks. So we were sequestered away for a long time. You don't see that much anymore.
No, not. I think it exists at the Fortune 500 level. Below that, when you get into small and medium sized businesses, it's apparently almost non-existent.
Yeah, well, that's unfortunate because that's then the importance of the role modeling within the organization is because when I worked for a number of venture funded startups in the tech space, I'd model my selling. I wanted to go on sales calls with the CEO and the founder
Right.
because they had the passion, they knew the product, they knew what they were trying to sell, they had that vision for what that solution was going to be that was going to make a difference to the customer. I wanted to go on sales calls with that person because that's how I was going to learn how to sell the product.
Yeah, agreed. And today it's almost well, most people, most small companies in particular, their sales strategy is to quote hire born salespeople. And their frequent concern is that well, I'm just not sure this guy's a salesperson.
Right.
So they kind of leave themselves open to circumstance and to happenstance. I mean, maybe we get lucky and maybe we don't, but clearly the really good people out there are not going to go work there anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're looking for opportunity to grow, develop, increase their skills, make more money, have a career path. And sadly, for many of the smaller companies, they don't make those kinds of things available.
Right. They don't have that mentor. So I'm going to give you a question to think about. We're going to take a break in a second. I'm going to give you a question to think about during the break, and we'll come back
Okay,
afterwards, and you're going
you
to
bet.
answer it. So the question is, you're a manager, you're new to a company, they brought you in to make a difference with their sales team. What would you do in the first week? What two things would you do in the first week that could have the biggest impact?
All right.
All right, so stay with us. After the break, as Kelly Riggs is going to share with us his secrets for quickly amping up your sales, and we'll be right back. Hi, this is Andy. Connect and Sell is used by sales reps at nearly 1,000 companies, including hundreds of technology startups and several Fortune 500 companies, to overcome the challenges of getting prospects on the phone. Companies using Connect and Sell grow their revenues faster by enabling their sales reps to have more sales conversations in 90 minutes than they could otherwise achieve in an entire week. Connect and Sell can be deployed directly to your sales reps, or you can take advantage of their outbound on-demand service, which delivers qualified prospect meetings scheduled directly on your sales reps' calendars. Visit connectandsell.com to learn more about how Connect and Sell can start filling your pipeline today. Welcome back. My guest today is Kelly Riggs. You can catch Kelly online at thebizlockerroom.com. Great podcast, blogs, pick up his books. We're going to talk about one of those books here in a second. So you talked about your book before, One-on-One Management. And the subtitle is What Every Good Manager Knows That You Don't. So tell me, what don't I know?
That is a great question. I think what most managers don't realize is that what got them promoted is not the skills that they need to use and utilize in a managerial role. Think about why we promote people. Salespeople are a great example. You may have been one. I certainly was. I was the National Salesperson of the Year for 2 years in a row. They said, great, you want to be a manager? I said, sure. And sadly, I thought they promoted me because I was great at selling. And they did. However, what they wanted me to do is to teach other people how to be great at selling, not do it for them. So we promote people into management leadership positions and don't realize that it's a completely different set of skills, and that learning to engage your employees is the critical part of what you will do. And if you're not good at that, if you're not good at leadership skills, which are, by the way, like selling skills, they can be learned by anyone, then you're going to struggle. And unfortunately, what will happen, Andy, over a short period of time is we'll go from the employee who just wished his or her manager would let them do their jobs. I have so much to offer. Please just get out of my way and give me an opportunity. Shortly after becoming a manager, we're saying the same kinds of things the other manager is saying. It's just hard to find good people these days. And it's just a transition to a different skill set that never happens.
So when you were promoted,
Mm-hmm.
what was sort of the first big lesson you picked up on that you had to learn about management?
Well, that was easy. I didn't know anything about how to hire. The first two or three people I hired were just abysmal choices. Of course, I thought they were great because they looked and sounded like me.
Mm-hmm.
And I was looking for people like me because clearly, if you want to be successful, and I've already
You
demonstrated
had to be like Kelly.
got to be like me. And so the first two or three I hired were just train wrecks. And I realized that I didn't know anything about hiring, and I made it my goal in life to learn everything I could about how to hire because I realized I was just terrible at it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the one big lesson I learned is that if you're going to add people to your team, you need to know a little bit about that.
Yeah, yeah, I've got horror stories of my own in that regard. Um, Actually, one my favorite story is one that I didn't hire the person, but I inherited them when another sales manager left, and this salesperson was having some real difficulties, and extremely well dressed, presented beautifully. Sort of what you're talking about, people that sort of looked like me. Um, but there's something that just wasn't right about him, and I go to the branch manager who had signed off on the hire with the other sales manager hired. I said, "So, did you ever check references on this person?" He said, "Well, we did, but we got a letter back saying that they couldn't release this person's transcript because they hadn't paid off their student loans." And I looked at the manager. I said, "Well, you realize in that instance, no one would ever get a reference letter or a transcript sent to their employer." Yeah, it turned out they'd fabricated the whole thing. Yeah, when you dug in and got there, they'd had a friend at the college, steal stationery, send it to the employer saying, we couldn't release the transcript, and you got it. It's a disaster.
Oh my goodness.
So yeah, everybody has that.
Yeah, everyone has those stories, and
So what did you change? What did you change in terms of what you were looking for? What did you learn first about? Okay, this is what I need to be careful of, because I think this is a really common problem for a lot of smaller enterprises where people hate hiring, they hate the process, viscerally hate it. Um, what's the first thing that you really learned about you had to look out for?
Well, I learned that what I experienced is what they call halo effect. And once someone connected with me at a personal level, then I would tend to see anything they did, as if they had a halo on. I mean, they really
Mm-hmm.
could do nothing wrong. And what I realized is that hiring a resume does not make any sense. Clearly, you want people who have a skill set that you need, but it's more about the talent that they bring to the table. As an example, if I need someone to open up a brand new territory, I need them to get out and cut trees down and create all new openings in the forest. I need a hunter. Then I need to make sure that I'm hiring that kind of person. That kind of salesperson is completely different than the traditional farmer who's great at relationships and long-term things, but it's going to take them a lot longer to build those relationships. The results aren't going to come as quickly. I need to make sure they don't have call reluctance if they're that kind of salesperson as well.
Mm-hmm.
I need people to demonstrate to me that they can create a plan, that they have done it in the past, that they understand the numbers of selling. And if not, that's something that I can teach them, but I need them to have an awareness of why numbers are important and not just throwing enough things against the wall until they stick, not those kind of numbers, but the mathematics of selling in terms of the number, what you have to have in your pipeline. And all. I need them to have some business acumen. I need
Right.
them to.
So how do you test that?
Well, there's a lot of ways. I mean, clearly the best indicator of future action is past actions. So what I don't want to do is ask questions like, well, what would you do if? What I want to do is, look, tell me about a time that you did X or you didn't do X. So, I want to put them on the spot. I don't want to say, tell me about your weaknesses. I want to say, tell me about a time that you had a big opportunity and you just lost it. I mean, it went south. You didn't get it. Tell me about what happened. Tell me how you handled it.
Mm-hmm.
This is where the psychology of selling and interviewing is really important because you're asking people something that's off base that they probably didn't anticipate, and they're going to need to think on their feet. And I'm looking for details. I'm looking for visceral reactions to this. I'm looking for real reactions and not the kind of made up answers that people practice. And the idea is that if you've done this in the past or you have failed at it in the past, I don't care about past failure, Andy. What I care about is what did they learn from it? And then I can do like you're doing here. Tell me how you took those lessons and turned it into something more productive.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to drill down on their numbers and their objectives, how they built their plans, if you say you grew your territory by 25% year over year, tell me how you did that. Well, I just got out and worked harder. That's not going to work for me. You're gonna need to show me a semblance of a business mind, that you know what it takes to purposely grow a territory, that you identified certain areas, certain products, certain sectors that you grew, that you increased your existing account base a certain percentage, and you added new accounts, and here's how you went about the process.
Mm-hmm.
There are a whole lot of insightful questions that you can ask. Sadly, most interviews are just resume reviews. Most sales managers say, "Oh, so I see you graduated from Ohio State, yeah, and you were in business. Tell me a little bit about that. How were your grades?
Yep. Yep.
And so, your first job out was this. Tell me about your responsibilities. How was that? And so we just do a resume review, and we ask a couple of the standard questions like, well, what are your strengths, and what would people say about you, and what are you looking for, and what motivates you? And anybody worth anything can float their way through an interview like that and get hired.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, I think, and I love the comment you made about the halo effect, because to me, that's one of the real issues is managers fall in love with these guys based on really superficial, or guys or girls, based on superficial qualities, right?
No question.
And one of the things I'm a big advocate for is if you found somebody that, maybe you brought back for the second interview, is maybe before the second interview, before you invest the time in doing your reference checks then, right? Do your reference checks before you fall in love with these people.
Agreed.
Because once you fall in love with somebody, quote unquote, fall in love with somebody, then you're just going to use reference checks as a way of sort of confirming what you want to hear, as opposed to really trying to find something that gives you a reason why you shouldn't hire them.
Well, I tell you another thing that I do that is old school. There's no question about it. I learned it as a young man, but one of the first jobs that I got in sales, my boss took me through all the interview paces and did a good job. And then he set up a role play scenario and said, I'm going to have you sell me this product. I'm going to give you the details of who you are, who you're calling on, what your product looks like, and your objective is to do X.
Right.
And so he left the room for 5 minutes and came back and said, Mr. Riggs, it is nice to meet you. I am Tom, and why are you here? And so I had to think on my feet. And what I didn't know then that I found out later was that he wanted to see, if I was articulate, could I think on my feet? Could I transfer business concepts in a good way?
Mm-hmm.
But he also wanted to see if I would try to close a sale. And if I did and he resisted, how hard would I go at it? And, I tried to close him, I think 3 or 4 times. And then he called time and he said, really nice job. He said, here's the thing. You are not ever going to close me. I'm not going to allow it. What I want to know is how far will you go before you run out of gas?
I'm going to go stand by your car in the parking lot.
So I think that's a great exercise for people. I've known people who have done it in the past. I know some people that say, oh, I don't do that. That's crazy. It doesn't work. But I will assure you, you find out a lot about people.
Absolutely.
When you put them on the spot and ask them to perform.
Well, I think you really bring out a critical point, and it's something that I stress in my writing and work with clients, is that if there's important qualities or characteristics that a new hire needs, you need to test them to make sure they have them.
Absolutely.
And yeah, I do something similar to what you did with a client. He was really surprised when I suggested this, is he was hiring a director of sales, and the director of sales was managing a group and also going to carry a bag for part of a territory. So I had to be able to make presentations and be relatively self-sufficient. So I said, well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to put candidates in a room with a laptop and a data sheet for one of your products and say, 10 minutes, put together a 3-slide PowerPoint presentation about this product and present it to us when we come back in. And we brought in, 15 candidates, maybe a little bit more.
Right.
And all but 5 walked before doing it.
Wow.
And I thought, okay, well, self-selection, right? But obviously they were concerned about their ability to perform, and he hired somebody that turned out to be pretty good and could do the job just like he wanted. So yeah, testing and verification, really important. All right, so that's great conversation. So I'm going to wrap this up in a few minutes. We're going to ask some rapid fire questions. Give me brief, concise answers. So what's the most powerful sales tool in your arsenal?
Oh, wow. That's what a question that is. I would say the most powerful sales tool, it really depends. It depends if I'm trying to get more of a marketing tool. Obviously, if you're talking about attraction and awareness, I think it has to be your presence on the internet. I mean, you have to be seen and
Mm-hmm.
you have to create credibility. To me, a salesperson has to have credibility or they're going nowhere. And in this day and age, every customer, almost without exception, knows more about you than you can ever imagine before you walk in the door.
Exactly.
And if you don't have a presence and if you're not a thought leader, then I think you're behind the curve. So I would suggest to you that one of the most powerful sales to you have that you have at your disposal is your credibility, and it should precede you into the room.
Right. Who's your sales role model?
I would probably pick a couple of different people. One of the people may or may not surprise you, but one of my sales role models is a guy by the name of Zig Ziglar.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up with Zig,
Sure.
and it wasn't just that he was a great speaker and all that. I loved his character. I loved his approach. I loved that he was about serving others and helping others. Of course, one of his most famous quotes is you can get everything you want in life if you help enough other people get what they want in life.
Right.
And in terms of being an actual role model, I would say probably him.
Perfect. So what's the one sales book that or not even sales book, what's the one book every salesperson should read?
Well, this may surprise you. I think the one sales book that everybody should read is probably not a sales book. It's The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Mm-hmm.
It was written by Stephen Covey back in the mid 80s.
Yep.
And it's not successful people, it's effective people. And it's just one of the most profound books that I've ever seen. It used to be required reading for the people that worked for me because I thought it made us better in every aspect of what we did, not just the selling side.
Okay, you're not the first one to mention that. So what's the first sales activity you do every day?
The first thing I do every day is review my plan. There's so much going on, especially when you're a solo entrepreneur like I am. You have so many moving parts. Time is the precious commodity that we deal in. It's the currency that we trade in. So the first thing I do is make sure that I'm doing the most important thing today, and that's really difficult when you've got 30 moving parts.
Right. No, I'm painfully aware of that. So, what's your favorite music to listen to psych yourself up for a sales call?
Blues.
Blues. Anybody in particular?
I've been a blues guy forever. Huge Stevie Ray Vaughan fan
Sure.
back in the day, but I love John Mayer. But I love a lot of old stuff. I'm really into the older blues. Allman Brothers, a big fan. A lot of different things like that. But there are a lot of newer guys out there too. Mayer probably being the most prolific.
So, what's your favorite social media tool and why?
I would say my favorite social media tool is LinkedIn far and away because first off, it links to Twitter. Anything you're doing there is going to link to Twitter. A lot of the publishing platform is moving to LinkedIn. I've had the good fortune of having several conversations with Tony Hughes, who's been kind of a trailblazer in that arena. But I think it's a place where you can connect with people, you can do your research, and you can publish, and you can build your credibility. I think there's just a lot of benefits.
Okay. What do you do to keep fit?
Currently P90X3.
Ah.
That's I need discipline in that space. I've always been a guy who tried to stay in shape, and my wife and I do it together, and we're accountability partners. And it's a 30-minute program. It's all laid out for me. I don't have to think, Andy. I just show up and do what they tell me.
Perfect. Well, you don't live in an apartment in New York City, so you obviously have space to do it at home.
A little bit.
Yeah. So, last question. Well, no,
Yes, sir.
actually, last sales question. So the one question you get asked most frequently by salespeople is?
Boy, hard to narrow that one down, but I think there's maybe one or two. One is, what's the one book or the one thing I need to be doing or reading at this point in time that will make me better? And the other one is, look, what's the easiest way to acquire new clients? It just seems to be harder to get in front of decision makers. What's the thing that I should be doing differently in that realm?
Got it. Good answer. Last question.
Yes, sir.
What do you consider your greatest success outside of work?
That one's easy. That's all about my family. I'm a guy that's been married 33, now 34 years, just June the 13th. 34 years married, 3 wonderful grown children. They've been successful in life, and I don't mean from a monetary perspective, although that's part of it from their view, but they're just good character kids. They're good citizens. They're good people. And my relationship with my wife clearly has been the driving force behind that.
Clearly. Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Well, I want to thank you for joining me today. Our guest has been Kelly Riggs. You'll make sure to visit his website at Biz Locker Room. That's BIZ, lockerroom.com. And be sure to check out his radio show and blogs. Like I said, I've been a guest, twice on your show?
Yeah, fantastic guest.
Yeah, and likewise here, and look forward to having you back again. So remember, make it a part of your day every day to learn something new to help you amp up your business. Until next time, this is Andy Paul. Good selling, everyone. Thanks for listening to the show. If you like what you heard and want to make sure you don't miss any upcoming episodes, please subscribe to this podcast on iTunes or Stitcher.com. For more information about today's guest, visit my website at andypaul.com.